Good morning. Welcome to this morning service. Hope all of you are enjoying this wonderful weather this morning. It's end of November, end of October, and already we're still having this wonderful weather. Hopefully it doesn't continue and that we have storms and rain and hopefully no flash floods, but hopefully we get some rain soon. We'll begin this morning's Dharma School service. If you would please join in the reading of Sambajo, followed by the reading of Juseige. If you would please join now in the reading of Golden Chain. I am a link in Amida's golden chain of love that stretches around the world. I will keep my link bright and strong. I will be kind and gentle to every living thing and protect all who are weaker than myself. I will think pure and beautiful thoughts, say pure and beautiful words, and do pure and beautiful deeds. May every link in Amida's golden chain of love be bright and strong, and may we all attain perfect peace. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Again, good morning, everyone. I'd like to begin my talk with a reading from, this is in a Dharma School service book. It's number 9 of selected sayings. I'm not sure where this originates from, but some of the passages that are collected here have following it, what it attributes to someone, whether it's Renyo or Shinan, but this one doesn't say where it comes from, but this is number 9. As the sun shines upon the earth, awakening into growth the seeds that lie dormant in the soil, may the light of wisdom shine into our hearts, into our minds, and truly awaken us to our ignorance, and by this insight, stir us to strive for a life of deeper understanding and enlightenment. This passage talks about the compassion, wisdom of Amida Buddha, of all Buddhas. Enlightenment is made up of 2 pieces, 2 components, wisdom and compassion. When you look at the statue of Amida Buddha, these are the 2 mudras that Amida Buddha is holding up, wisdom and compassion. The light of the candle reminds of wisdom. The flowers, in a way, although they kind of remind us of the impermanence of things, they also kind of remind us of the compassionate, that the life that represents compassion. Infinite light is wisdom, infinite life is compassion. These are the 2 things that together are the 2 main characteristics of enlightenment. It's not just wisdom, and it's not just compassion. It's these 2 things working together that is enlightenment. wisdom that allows us to see things as they are, and compassion, how we respond to the world around us. If we can see things as they are, but there's no compassion, then there's no heart. If we are compassionate but lack wisdom, then there's no insight, there's no recognition of things as they are. But it's these two things working together that make enlightenment what it is and as important as it is. In this passage that I read, that enlightenment, that wisdom and compassion is shared with all beings. It's not just for those who are Buddhists. It's not just for those who are like ourselves. It's not just for people who think like us or who behave like us. It's for all beings, everyone, that wisdom and compassion works for. That allows us to maybe think about how we understand the world around us. When we think of only about my ideas, or when we think about only about what was important to me, or what I feel I need, or the way that I think is the only way to see things, then I shut out the rest of the world. And I'm only concerned with what I'm doing or what I'm thinking about. And that if we can begin to kind of take to heart what this passage is saying, that it's for all beings, everyone is included in the wisdom and compassion of Amida Buddha, of enlightenment, of all Buddhas. That if we can kind of begin to think in that way, then that feeling of sharing with others, being aware of the concerns that others may have, and how we respond to that can begin to take on a new way of seeing the world, a new way of kind of engaging the world. Not just what I want, not just what I need, but what I'm thinking about. Even the most difficult circumstances where the other person or the circumstance, what's in front of you, may go contrary to, absolutely against what you think and what you believe and hold to be true. Buddhism would suggest that maybe we need to spend a bit more time thinking about what's in front of us, reflecting upon what our thoughts might be regarding what's in front of us. When we are in class, or when we were in our schools and able to meet our friends and our classmates, there were more opportunities to kind of test this. But even at home, you're not on a playground or in classrooms in the way that you were last year. And so there's not as much interaction with other people. But even within your home, how you understand your brothers and sisters, or what you think about your parents are asking you to do, or even in your Zoom classes or your remote learning classes, how are you thinking about what you're seeing and what you're experiencing? If we can understand that the compassion and wisdom of Amida Buddha and of all Buddhas are for everybody equally, then we might be able to think of what is troubling us in a different way. We might be able to think about the source of those difficulties as being within how I'm thinking and how I'm responding to what I'm experiencing. Even if we continue to disagree, it may open up opportunities for us to connect in a way that we might not have thought possible, and that we can begin to communicate, begin to engage, to think about those who might be different from us in a way that connects us as human beings, and build on that, and try to do those things in a way that affirms the life that we share with one another. This awakening, the seeds that lie dormant in the soil. And so maybe I'll just kind of read this again. As the sun shines upon the earth, awakening into growth, the seeds that lie dormant in the soil. May the light of wisdom shine into our hearts and minds and truly awaken us to our ignorance. And by this insight, stir us to strive for a life of deeper understanding and enlightenment. Buddhism always suggests that the change that we need to make is in our understanding of what we are experiencing. When we become angered or disappointed, certainly there is something there that is the cause of that disappointment. But we can also look at within ourselves and to see or to think about how our feelings originate within our minds, our hearts, and that we can begin maybe to think about, not necessarily agree, but think about how we respond to what is causing us to begin or to feel unsettled or unhappy. As we enjoy this wonderful weather now, I think some of us are concerned also that this wonderful weather means that our fire season will continue. As we look at the fire season that we've already experienced, it has been a very difficult time for so many people. And that if we look at the wonderful weather that we are experiencing, we can also see within the enjoyment of that weather also the possibility and potential of difficulties, and find balance in how we respond to the world around us. Not just the joy that we are experiencing, but also being mindful of the difficulties that can arise around us. Buddhism is always about trying to see more clearly the world in which we exist, see more clearly how we think and feel about the world. Again, thank you very much for joining us again for this morning's service. In our 10:10 service, Michael Jones will be our guest speaker. So please, if you can, join us for that. Also, Mikame Sensei, who you saw join us for sutra chanting, will be speaking at Palo Alto at 10 o'clock. So that's why she kind of dashed off after sutra chanting. She went on to join the Palo Alto temple through Zoom. It's really interesting how these remote services allow us to kind of time shift and be places and do things that we were really not able to do under other circumstances. But we can expand, again, our understanding and engage the world with that understanding to be able to share what we appreciate in the world around us. Again, thank you for being a part of this morning's 9:30 service. As we conclude, will you please join Gassho and then Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you, everybody. Off to class. Let me see. I was getting, if you have any questions, write them down. You can always send them in either through email or contact us somehow. And we can try and maybe talk about some of the questions that you might have regarding the teachings of the Buddha. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. See you in class. Good morning.
Sensei.
We'll start Kansho shortly. So thank you for everyone for being here. Again, good morning and welcome to this morning's service. As we begin, if you please join in the reading of Sambujo, followed by the reading of Junidai. Namanda, 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 namanda.
おひざ上女線の 초라이 미나손 기뻐 쇼라이 쇼무십 갱엔 진스시 안하 생고 송엔 조근요 공아 초라이 미나손 쇼음은 조문아도 야군요 스잉아즈넨 요로 이슈세포무묘집 공아 초라이 미나손 이솜무세즈무아구묘 야금은 요니 아그노그 주니 시신교희손 공아 초라이 미나손 이솜문요 호맹교 무쇼슈아 그지시기 어조부타이시보나이 공아 초라이 미나손 아세주이 송그노그집 슈셈무헨 요카이스이 쇼양우생문 쇼조샤 에세슈 조쇼
Will you please join now in the reading of the three treasures? Hard is it to be born into human life, and now we are living it. Difficult is it to hear the teachings of the Blessed One, now we hear it. If we do not deliver ourselves in the present life, no hope is there that we shall be freed from suffering and sorrow in the ocean of birth and death. Let us reverently take refuge in the three treasures of the truth. I take refuge in Buddha. May we all together absorb into ourselves the principle of your way to enlightenment and awaken in ourselves our supreme will. I take refuge in Dharma. May we all together be submerged in the depth of thy doctrine and gain wisdom as deep as the ocean. I take refuge in Sangha. May we all together become units in true accord in your life of harmony, in a spirit of universal brotherhood, freed from the bondage of selfishness. Even through ages of myriads of kalpas, hard is it to hear such an excellent, profound, and wonderful doctrine. Now we are able to hear and receive it. Let us thoroughly understand the true meaning of Tathagata's teaching. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Good morning and welcome to this morning's service. I'm very happy to have as our guest speaker this morning someone which hopefully someone who all of you should be well acquainted with. Michael Jones has served as a visiting president. He has been active in our youth organizations and has served in our national organization. And he continues to seek opportunities to learn and to share the Dharma. Michael is one of three minister assistants that began almost a year and a half ago along with Dennis Akizuki and Sumi Tanabe. Dennis and Michael are a part of the Jodo Shinshu correspondence course. And every month they have to check in with their instructors and write essays and study hard. And they continue to do so. In this, I guess in this beginning of this summer, they should be able to complete that course of study. But it's wonderful to be able to have Michael here this morning for this morning's Dharma message. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Sensei. Yes, Sensei. Could you all join me, please? Each one of us has to be our true self, fresh, solid, at ease, loving, and compassionate. When we are all our true selves, not only do we benefit, but everyone around us profits from our presence. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't start off by saying happy birthday, Rinban. Omedetou. So let's get started here. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to everybody today. Hope everyone is well and enduring this pandemic and all its associated restrictions, but still, we are living in very challenging times, and to say that would just be an understatement. We're surrounded by discord, and it's a very disrupted existence at this point. Political angst began several years ago. Racial tensions began to rise as a number of Black people became victims of shootings, and justice seemed to be absent. Then came the pandemic. Add all that together and toss in economic disruptions and uncertainty, and we have a nation, really a world of anger, blame, retribution, and civil unrest. What's the right thing to do? What's the right thing to say? Through the years, I've heard people say that Buddhism does not have ethics as part of its teaching and values. In fact, someone brought this up recently in our Dharma study class, which, by the way, meets every second and fourth Tuesday of the month at 7 p.m. And you're all welcome to join us because we meet via Zoom. But I digress. So talking about ethics. This subject was intrigued me because the very first real Buddhist book I ever read was called The Ethics of Enlightenment by Reverend Ronald Nakasone. So in our September meetings, we discussed this, and in preparation, I did some research and found that you could probably spend years studying ethics in Buddhism, and it goes back hundreds of years. In fact, Nagarjuna, the first of the 7 patriarchs or masters pictured up on our Onaiji, wrote about ethics in Buddhism. And he lived in the 2nd century of the modern era, about 600 years after the Buddha. Nagarjuna had a friend who was a very busy king, but who held a firm belief in the Buddhist teachings. He needed help on how to balance his busy schedule and his lay lifestyle and his practice of Buddhism. So Nagarjuna wrote a letter to him, which was documented and commented on in a text called Letter to a Friend. It's available in a nice, neat little textbook. In this letter, Nagarjuna writes about the 6 reminders. He says, bring to mind the 6 recollections taught by the conqueror, the triple gem, the Buddha, his teachings and community, generosity, ethics, and the enlightened mind. Contemplate the qualities of the 6 for inspiration on the path. The conqueror mentioned here is Shakyamuni Buddha, who conquered enlightenment. The triple gem we know as the 3 treasures. As Nagarjuna wrote on a more detailed level, he also mentioned ethics, using the term moral precepts. If one has vowed to refrain from a particular type of behavior, maintain that vow well and without subversion. Holding a moral precept is the foundation of all virtue, just as the earth is the ground upon which both animate and inanimate stand. Well, now this brings us to another interesting point. When the topic of ethics comes up, we frequently bring up the concept of morality. My opinion is that ethics plays a fairly important role in Buddhism, but morality has a much smaller role. Of course, that's my opinion, but it's based on the idea that morality requires judging others. And it's something that we attempt to avoid in our Buddhist way of life. But let's start looking at a couple of definitions. Ethics. Ethics is defined as moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. Then is ethics the same as morality? One author points out that many people view morality as something personal and relating to societal norms, whereas ethics is a standard of good and bad, typically within a social, business, or other grouping of people. Ethics is often a topic in business settings, whereas morality is often raised in a religious setting or at home. If you turn on the television, watch a movie, or read a novel, you may typically find the characters discuss ethics at the office and morality at home. Listening to the news, we hear of a politician's ethics being questioned when discussing how they influence votes, interrogate witnesses, or dispense information about people on the other side of the aisle. But on that same broadcast, if the same politician is being accused of adultery or other sexual misbehavior, then it is his morality that becomes the subject of the discussion. An example of how long the subject of ethics has been around Buddhism can be found in the story of King Asoka of Magadha, who ascended the throne in 272 before the Common Era. He adopted Buddhism and began an era of rule that was based largely on Buddhist ethics. Though he appeared to support all of the major religions of his time, his policies and his actions were heavily influenced by his understanding of the Buddhist path. The approach to ethical behavior is introduced in another text as applying the teachings to everyday life. How can I apply the teachings of Shakyamuni to my life in such a way that my restlessness and dissatisfaction can be reduced, neutralized, and eventually extinguished? And now that's sort of a fancy way of saying, how can I eliminate my suffering? The answer, according to this author, is spiritual practice, which takes 3 forms in Buddhism: ethical behavior, meditation and the wisdom that follows, and devotion. Most of the literature that I've found on ethics ends up with a discussion and a detailed explanation on precepts. You'll remember that the 5 basic or fundamental precepts are do not kill, do not steal, do not engage in sexual misconduct, do not lie, and do not use intoxicants. The sixth paramita, which you can find at the beginning of our service book, also talk about ethical behavior. As a reminder, they are selfless giving or dana, which we talk about a lot, discipline or sila, patience or ksanti, something we could all do more with, endeavor or vira, meditation, dhyana, and wisdom or prajna. The second precept, discipline or sila, can be expanded to the thought of the following the self-discipline of ethical behavior. So again, the second precept, discipline, leads to the self-discipline of ethical behavior. In Buddhism, we tend to have a more humanistic definition of ethical behavior as the avoidance of giving harm to others. So our form of ethics or ethical behavior is to say no words, do no deeds that are harmful to another person. We can do that in three ways. We use restraint when we refrain from doing harm by telling lies, for instance, by taking positive actions to study and learn more about the teachings and adhering to the precepts, you accumulate virtue. And finally, by helping others, showing compassion, or generally adding to the welfare of other people, you're benefiting others. So again, when I look at the precepts or ethical behavior, it benefits me and it benefits others. There's a Buddhist researcher and author named Peter Harvey, and he writes, in Buddhism, moral value or discipline, sila, is the foundation of spiritual path. He continues that this encompasses a model of ethics that's part of a path. He explains that different sects have slightly differing views on the path, and that Jodo Shinshu sees the ethical path is simply expressing gratitude to Amitabha for having saved one. Ethical action, he continues, contributes to the overcoming of suffering or dukkha for both oneself and others. Once again, we're saying that ethics help define our path out of suffering. When we begin to discuss this subject broadly, that is, an ethical life, we often begin to introduce the term morality into the discussion. Though we touched on the difference a little earlier, in my personal opinion, ethics is a matter of knowledge and intent, whereas morality is a matter of action. Now, NCIS, a very popular TV show and one which I've watched continuously since its beginning, had an episode where Dr. Mallard, the medical examiner, was studying for his degree in criminal psychology, and he was asked to describe the difference between ethics and morality. He answered, an ethical man knows it's not right to cheat on his wife. A moral man does not cheat on his wife. Simple. Admittedly, we don't hear much about in our Dharma messages about ethics or morality. We do, however, hear a lot about the Eightfold Path, the Six Paramita, the Five Precepts, compassion, loving kindness. As I stated earlier, talking about morality tends to require rendering judgment. And that's something we try not to do, but we know we always do it. However, we are always curious about what it is we're supposed to do. How are we supposed to act? How should we react to certain situations? My experience may be different from yours, but I often feel when I ask a minister about what I should do in a tough situation, I feel like I'm talking to a psychiatrist. What do you think you should do is the common answer. So what do you think? Are there ethics in Buddhism? Does morality matter in Buddhism? For me, I tend to like Peter Harvey's interpretation of ethics that I stated earlier, where in Buddhism, moral virtue is the foundation of the spiritual path, and that this encompasses a model of ethics that's part of a path. We in Jodo Shinshu see the ethical path as expressing our gratitude to Amida for his primal vow, and we entrust our enlightenment to Amida. Now, Reverend Harada, our bishop, wrote a book a few years ago called Discovering Buddhism in Everyday Life. And this is a collection of his sermons over time. And in a sermon from 2009, he talks about the limits of the world of morality and ethics. And he said, Buddhism as a religion and teaching, of course, has a foundation of morality and ethics, but it's also a teaching that goes beyond morality and ethics. Buddhism doesn't teach us to go around killing or lying or stealing, but at the same time, Buddhism is a teaching of spiritual awakening and liberation that even a person on death row could awaken to. In fact, a person who is in prison, whom in the eyes of the moral and ethical world is immoral, can have a deeper understanding of Buddhism than someone who is a moral or ethical person. Interesting perspective. Moral virtue is not our signal to judge the actions or intentions of others. We need to focus on our own thoughts and actions. Ethics, for example, the precepts, are a set of things to avoid doing. Though each is expressed in the negative as something from which to abstain, following the precepts can evolve into a positive virtue. Instead of dwelling on the idea of not killing someone or not lying to someone, we can focus instead on kindness and compassion. Rather than focusing on the negative rule of avoiding adultery, we can think of the positive behavior of joyous satisfaction with one's own wife. What started off as a list of behaviors to avoid becomes a list of positive virtues on which you can build your life on your path to enlightenment. So how do we put these ideas to work in our life? Let's start by asking why. Why do we react to people and situations with negative thoughts and emotions? Our words and actions that follow can often be hurtful and non-productive. And afterwards, we often regret the way we reacted. As I mentioned earlier, morality involves judgment. When we react negatively to someone's words and actions, we tend to judge them using our own ethical framework. That is, according to what we believe is right and what's wrong. However, do we know the causes and conditions that led to their words or actions? Do we understand the path that they have been on and what's led to this moment? Usually the answer is no, we don't. This is the point at which compassion needs to arise in us. Renyo said that the faults of others are easy to see, but the faults of our own are difficult to recognize. If one sees that he has a fault that he must recognize, that fault must be very grave indeed for him to recognize it himself. Thus, he must take steps to correct his fault. Because it is difficult for us to see many of our faults, we should listen to the advice of others. Now, compassion doesn't mean that we approve of other people's actions. It doesn't mean that we ignore their words. Instead of judging and condemning, we seek to understand. If the situation calls for it, we can intervene to stop the actions or the flow of harmful speech. But our next step is understanding, not retribution, not retaliation, not punishment. We use our sense of ethics to guide our words and actions. We use our common sense to keep ourselves and others safe. And we use our compassion to help others find their way out of their dark moments. In the family service this morning, Rinban Sakamoto mentioned a passage out of the Dharma School Service book, item 9, that said, as the sun shines upon the earth, awakening into growth the seeds that lie dormant in the soil, may the light of wisdom shine into our minds and truly awaken us to our ignorance, and by this insight stir us to strive for a life of deeper understanding and enlightenment. We have to pause and reflect. Is what others are doing, worth our judging to decide that they're bad or that they need to be punished or that we need to go after them in some way? I really think that the answer is that we need to look at ourselves and show some compassion for where they might have come from and what path they may have been on. I believe the answer to the original question here, does Buddhism teach ethics, is yes. And though these ethical concepts are often stated in terms of what not to do, these many lists of precepts, rules, and actions actually give us a framework or a path. Looking at these various rules and turning them into virtuous goals, we get a set of positive guides to our life, showing us the path of freedom. Please join me in Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for your wonderful message, and thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. And we, talked about that in study class about ethics and morality, and how Nakazone Sensei's Dharma talk, not Dharma, his book was influence in how we, how you think about ethics and morality. And I think sharing that with us this morning, as you say, maybe causes us to pause and to think about how our actions will affect the world, and not just about whether that person is good or that person is bad, whether I'm behaving appropriately or not, but to think about what's going on within and to be able to respond in a compassionate way. Again, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on the Dharma. As we conclude this morning's service, I want to thank again Michael and all of you for joining us in this morning's service. We are very fortunate that we have a resource here to help us in our understanding of the Dharma. Thank you very much. As we conclude, will you please join in Gassho and Nembutsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you, everyone. See you next week. Thank you. Thanks, Michael.